Hello, everyone. Hi,
Hello.
everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Challenges and Spiritual Gifts of Aging. I'm Laura Scappaticci, the Director of Programs for the Anthroposophical Society, and I'm joined here with Dr. David Gershan. David, could you say hi so everyone can see
Hi,
you?
everybody. Hello.
That's great. Okay, we have a bunch of people jumping onto the call. And if this is your first time on a webinar, thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad you were able to come. And one thing we usually do in the beginning of the webinar is try to find out where you are calling from or watching from. So if you could type that in to the Q&A, there's a little Q&A box. See if you can find that on your screen. If you move your mouse around, you should be able to find it. And you can type into that Q&A. I see David's moving his mouse around. You can type in where you are from. And yeah, there we go. Good job. Okay. Hello. And we will be using some names. So if that's not okay, let us know. Just write no name, please. But we do have Onat here and David from upstate New York, Heather from Vermont, Shirley from Cincinnati. Hello. Hey, John and Heidi from, oh my gosh, I'm so glad to see them, from Angelic Organics. Fiona from Toronto. Elena from Berkeley, made it. Nice to see you here. Elizabeth, hello. We have an anthroposophical
Elizabeth.
nurse.
People.
That's right. She's tuning in from Northampton, Massachusetts, one of my favorite places. One of our other presenters for our last webinar, Dr. Patricia Hart, is on the call from North Carolina. Asharain, I think, from, Whidbey Island, what a beautiful place. Thank you for joining us, everybody. If you're just coming on, if you want to type in just for just another moment where you're tuning in from, I'm up here in Northern California, and so is David, but he's much closer to the water than I am. Lucky guy. Okay, Eileen's here from Vermont. Thank you so much for joining us, and I think we'll get started, but I just wanted to say a few things about working with you, David. It's so fun to work with you. You have such a great sense of humor and such just a beautiful understanding of people and their health, and just like an intuitive, beautiful understanding. So I just feel very lucky to be working for you. And I just thought I'd let some folks know, maybe they saw this when they registered, that you have been working with community health and family health, and you've worked with homelessness and HIV and all a wide variety of medical practices, and really working so strongly with Anthroposophical medicine. So thank you so much for doing that work. So I'm gonna I'm gonna turn it over to you, and just to get us started. I'm so looking forward to this. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. That was very flattering. The truth is that I get fired from one position and move on to another. So got an incredible resume there. So three docs are going to present a three-part discussion on aging. The first one is mine, and I'm calling it Aging and the Balance Point. The second one will be presented by the great Renee Meyer from South Carolina, and then the third one by the very great Pat Hart, who I think is tuning in. She is a palliative care specialist. So, Aging and the Balance Point. All right, Laura.
Is it not going? Are you using your arrows?
Yeah.
Okay, and it won't go. That's happened to me in the past too. So let me see. Yeah, that's great. Let me see if I can get the slides. Do you want to stop the share for a minute, and and I'll pull the slides up?
Okay, so what, shall I get out of this?
Yeah, just do the stop share. Do you see the stop share? Everyone needs to see your slides, so we'll have to make that happen. Good, okay, so I'm gonna work on those slides while you...
It's working. You just can't see me.
Now we can see you, but we can't see your slides.
Oh, okay.
Let me try for those slides, okay? And then you can just say, next slide. Okay. All right? Okay, yeah. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Hang on just a minute.
How's that look? Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah? Okay. Can't hear you.
I know, I don't know why, but let's
Okay,
yeah, let's see what happens.
okay, so next slide, please.
Oh my gosh, what is going on? Let's see here. Okay. Well, we're having some problems with the slides. So let me see if I can see what is going on. I'm going to pause the share. How's that? Can everyone see the next slide now or no?
I can't.
You can't. Okay. So maybe, David, you should just sort of start to talk about what's next while I mess around with the slides, because I'm having some problem on my end too, which doesn't usually last this long, but there's something going on. So,
Sure. So I chose the balance point as a title because it represents what every human being and actually every living being, there's our next slide. Okay, must do to equilibrate, to take care of herself every minute of the day. The balance point is reached unconsciously and consciously. It's reached in the physiology, in the biochemistry of the body, in the psychology of the self, the not self. You get the picture here. So this slide is a composite of scenes from a very famous film by the Japanese director, my hero, Akira Kurosawa.
and David, there's a little crinkly sound going on. So just, I don't know if you're touching papers or typing or something. Yeah. Okay. Right. Great. Thanks.
It's called Rhapsody in Autumn. A very, very profound film. Takes place in Japan. And it is about a very old woman and a group of children, and then the middle-aged young man, played by Richard Gere, who comes to visit. And it is a film about many things, but it's also a film about youth and old age. And I chose it as an image. Perhaps you can rent it and watch it. It is very, very touching. Okay, next slide, please. All right. A little bit about growth and life cycles. I won't really go into life cycles the way a Waldorf teacher will, and I'm really adverse to listing all of the elements of anything, actually. But the idea of the head and what happens to the head in the human body is a very important aspect of growing and maturing. So in the embryo, the head is at a proportion of 1:2 to the rest of the body. So that's huge. You could say that the embryo is practically all head. At birth, the proportion is now 1:3, 1 part head, 3 parts rest of the body. And by adulthood, the proportion is between 1:7 and 1:8. So something has happened in growth. The head predominance has given way to something. It's given way to a peripheralizing and an independence of organs. In the embryo and in the newborn, most of the direction of the metabolism, however unconscious, comes from the head. The head is directing the whole picture because the organs are very immature. The limbs are, of course, extremely immature. The baby is completely helpless. And the head is the predominant anatomical organ, and it does its work completely unconsciously, of course. Next slide. Next, thanks. More on head predominance. The direction of growth and incarnation is from the head as a center, and there's a gradual deepening of the center, moving away from the head, moving ultimately to the heart, and a gradual descent of the life, soul, and spiritual forces that are alive in the human being. The growth is totally unconscious process, and is there some way to move my shot so I can read this damn thing here?
Yeah, you should be able to grab your picture and drag it if you can see that.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
I've been dragged before. Okay. So, growth is totally unconscious process. Imitation. The child imitates. What does this mean? It doesn't mean that the child necessarily is mimicking, like in a mime show, although there is a bit of that happens as the child ages. But imitation is the mirroring of everything that comes to the child, and it's completely unconscious. The mirroring of physiology, of biochemistry, of anything that meets the child. And this includes a toxic environment, a loving and warm environment, etc. Unfortunately, toxic and shocking occurrences can and do cause permanent changes in that person. And one of the things any humanistic physician should be doing is going to these kinds of core issues. Last year, the life forces, the soul forces, the inner psychological and physical activities, and the striving for uprightness. So there are three major forces that you all are aware of. This is not a convenient way of portraying the human being. These are real entities, real forces, and real spiritual activities. Next slide. With growth, there is a gradual freeing, period. There is a gradual freeing in every direction. There is a freeing of the life forces that happen roughly around the 7th year with the second set of teeth, the teeth that come in after the milk teeth. This heralds a certain kind of precipitation, the same, and this the entire body is doing, not just the gums that are producing teeth. This is a total body, a physiologic occurrence. That's why it is so important. In Waldorf, one of the things that the school wants to take notice of are the teeth in, are they coming in, and what is the condition of the teeth? Because they tell us so much about the life body, the etheric body, and the readiness for this child to do something new. And that something new is intellectual activity. Before that, it might even be dangerous. Early learning, which was so popular in the 70s and 80s and 90s, has become less popular, thank God. The child is actually not equipped, but the child does become equipped. There's a partial emancipation of this life sheath, and it then serves the spiritual being of the child for thinking and intellectual activity. Okay, next. With the growth of the body and the gradual elongation, there is also a gradual descent of the I, or the ego, or the ich. And this I is the organization of the ego. The ego is a real thing. Again, this is not a poetic conceit here. And it's not necessarily Freud's narrower concept of the ego. This ego, which is really directing every other activity in the human being begins a descent from the head organization deeper into the body. There is an uprightness that is the product of this descent by one. There is a control of the metabolism that begins roughly around 9 years. This I has descended now into the metabolism, a very interesting occurrence, the 9-year change. And then the I, like the life body, is freed eventually at 21 years. So there's a freeing of this body to offer itself to something else. And that is a much more organizational kind of working in the world, more of an objectivity. Next slide. Breakdown and build up. So besides the descent and the various problems with descent, there's then the breakdown and buildup. I'm giving titles to what I consider to be major polarities in the human being. So breakdown and buildup. I wonder if you're familiar with the Prometheus myth. It is the myth of, it's the story of Prometheus chained to the rock in the ocean. The liver of Prometheus, unfortunately, and this has got to hurt, is devoured by an eagle during the day, and at night, Prometheus is left alone to recuperate. Now, this is a loaded story. It can be looked at as the real picture of daytime metabolism versus nighttime metabolism, awakefulness and sleep, and also breakdown. Because in order to have breakdown, there must be sufficient stuff to break down. And the stuff is thoughts, impressions, artistic impressions, food, the air we breathe, all of that, the touch, what we see, what we smell, everything must be broken down by the human being. And this is what the ego organization directs. And to the extent that this breakdown is successful is the extent to which all of this content, psychological and material, can then be humanized and used by the human being in various ways. So the idea of digestion, the simple idea that you eat something and then it goes in various ways, is really not the picture at all. It's kind of the picture of, Union Station in Manhattan, and you're going to pick a train route, but that's really not how digestion happens at all. So what happens to the undigested matter? Is it possible that not everything is digested? It is.
Oh, David, hi. We just lost your sound a little bit. It just got a little, there we go. That's better.
Better?
Yeah.
I can't do anything here.
You're doing great. This is I'm sorry.
What happens to the undigested matter? What does this even mean? Besides matter that's in the stomach, but what happens to the overwhelmed person? What happens to the infant who, strapped to the proud daddy's chest, is facing out, let's say, a crowded mall? What about that? What about all that input? Do we think that's digested? Do we think it's managed? Or in fact, does what comes to the infant have to be filtered through the parent? Something to think about. It is easy to be overwhelmed. There are other ways in which matter and psychological content are not fully digested. We'd have to look at the weakness of the entire human being. Is the ego organization itself weak? Has it become weak and therefore can't direct this breakdown process to make all content available for upbuilding, meaning upbuilding in the blood, the building of the blood. Okay, so we're going to come to our first medical challenge, and that is arthritis. Osteoarthritis as opposed to rheumatoid arthritis, although in ways they have crossover points. One is an inflammatory kind of arthritis, and the other is a colder kind of arthritis. Now, the colder kind of arthritis, the common osteoarthritis, means that there is a digestion problem. The digestion is weak. And what happens? There can be crystals and concretions and matter gathering in the joints. There can be cholesterol lining the arteries. There can be rumination, psychological rumination. There can be the kind of the loop thinking, the paranoia, the self-questioning that goes around and around. I'm not worthy. And then the depression, and then the self-doubt, and this is a circular kind of a pattern here. So psychological matter is also subject to poor digestion. Arthritis happens to the bones, but it also means that tendons and cartilage are all implicated here. There's not only a drying out and a cooling off, but there's then the crystallizing of what should be semi-wet tissue. So not only is the ego organization now weak here, but also the life processes have become weak. They don't offer the streaming fluid life process anymore, or don't offer it sufficiently. And then there's the pain that is carried by the soul body. Okay. I think you get it. Next slide. More on build-up and breakdown. As we said, the life processes are unconscious. They are the plant in us. They are not only in a constant state of build-up, especially in the child, but they require constant build-up. The plant is a constantly growing organism. Think of the philodendron that can just fill up a room. To become conscious, however, requires a holding back of the life process, which would only be in Prometheus's sleep nighttime world, the rebuilding, the building up. But that's not all that we are. We are also breakdown organisms or catabolic organisms. And what is the fruit of catabolism? The fruit of catabolism is awareness and consciousness. That is one of the great ironic profundities in anthroposophy. So dwell on that for a while. I have a sip of water. The sensing, the feelings, the inner life. The inner life cannot happen without this soul body, the astral body, entering the human being through the kidneys, So there you can see already a whole world of physiologic questions that have to do with kidneys, with the soul body, with then the soul body's interest in being in the middle, in the breathing and in the circulation and in the air and in the gases, what we take in, what we expel. But there is a continuum here between, with the feelings, there is the pleasurable feeling, there's the slightly itchy feeling, the tickly feeling, and then the intense itching and the pain, and the excruciating pain, and then the paralysis. These are all in a continuum that is carried by the soul body.
Can I ask a question? Do you mean this continuum is not in relationship to arthritis? It's in relationship to, can you say a little bit more? Because I'm like going back, like, is that what happens over time? Can you say a little bit more?
There is a relationship with arthritis because of pain. Okay, so with the pain that comes with very, very stiff joints or with undigested matter between the joints, the soul body becomes involved. So now with arthritis, the challenge deepens, and I was going to get to that. So here, the pain is a very valuable indicator of what is not happening and where it is not happening in a satisfactory manner. Is that good? That kind of
that's helpful. That's just a helpful understanding of pain in general. So thank you.
Yeah.
Shows us what's not happening.
Well, it also shows us what's happening in a way that we wouldn't like it to happen.
Right.
The last point here is about awareness. Awareness and sleep. We've already covered that with Prometheus, but I'm trying to establish here a very wide polarity and a continuum between the polarity of buildup and breakdown. So there is awareness and sleep, and there's everything that happens in between. There is the acute awareness, the hypervigilance, the psychological hypervigilance, the paranoia of the kidney disease, and then the dulled constitution, the plant-like constitution. And these are all within a continuum having to do with awareness and sleep that we look at and that have a lot of meaning in aging, which we will come to. Next slide. Okay. In the maturing process, there is a change, I think, that happens in wisdom. And this is one of the keys to an acceptance of aging. So we're going down that path now. And that is the difference, that is what is wisdom and what does awareness have to do with wisdom in this continuum that we're trying to establish. So the wisdom is everywhere, obviously. The wisdom in nature is enthralling. The wisdom of the beehive, the wisdom of the rose, the wisdom of season change. It is a wisdom that we are so in awe of, we couldn't really ever begin to capture that, but only be in awe of it. However, there's a wisdom in the body as well. There's a wisdom in the physiology, and that, for the most part, is very unconscious in the small child. But something begins to happen somewhere around 21, around this freeing of the ego organization, partial emancipation. There's a shift in wisdom. Wisdom becomes a question of consciousness. Can we attain wisdom and transform the unconscious wisdom through a conscious effort. And this is going to have huge power in the aging person. The maturing of wisdom as a fruit of aging. And this is a gift of the partial freeing of the ego organization that happens roughly around 21. Then the capacity for objective thinking, for thinking that is not so endocrinal the way the puberty provides for thinking, not so caught up in the immense feeling nature of the teenager. But to remember that as consciousness develops, the body breaks down. And this is the part that we must come to terms with in aging. Okay, so it's been a half an hour. Let's take a little break and perhaps discuss some of this stuff. If anyone would like to offer a contribution, ask a question.
Yeah, so if anyone has a question, you can type it into the Q&A and we can go into that for a little bit now. Wow, there is so much here. We were talking a little bit ahead of time, David, and saying, that a webinar is just a taste and you can only get so far with it, and it offers you a picture, and then you have to go further with your study. So,
I think if
yeah.
people want it, then I think the whole idea here of developing the webinars is becoming more and more obvious. All right, so I'm going to push on.
I think you should, yeah. Okay.
So the peak of the body's vitality and, oh boy, you didn't see that. The peak of the body's vitality here happens somewhere around the 35th year, and maybe later now, but somewhere in that cycle, okay, somewhere in the 5th cycle of development. Steiner gave to the physician, to the teacher, to the parent, to anyone really, the idea of the growth cycles, the 7-year cycles, and they are a deepening of other ideas of growth cycles. And there are very famous growth cycles that are studied in pediatrics and in child psychology, and this really, unfortunately, is not one of them that should be. So with the development of the human being and the peak, really somewhere between the 35th and 40th year, comes now yet a new change. And that is the realization that you might, like other people, be mortal. You might be one of those people who's going to die. And it comes to every one of us in degrees, this realization. It can be a shock. It can be something of such gargantuan importance that we have to run from it, that we have to ignore it for a while. It sits there, maybe, in the back of the room. It may not. But the confrontation with mortality begins at this peak, at the peak of one's life. And it is at this time a very, very slow excarnation begins. Very, very slow. Now, what do we mean here? You take half the life to incarnate. You incarnate the life force, and it has its partial freedom. You incarnate the soul body. It has its partial freedom. Similarly, the entire ego organization deepens and moves down throughout the entire body and then metamorphoses into greater consciousness and wisdom. But at a certain point, all of these functions begin to cool down and begin to slow down. You discover that you can't run up the hill quite as quickly as you could. With me, of course, it started at 10, but you discover that you can't move along from an interpersonal challenge to put it away, to resolve it and move on. It stays with you. There is a little stiffening of the joints here, things like that. The skin begins to change, etc. And really at 35, many women begin to experience the menopause. There is a wide range for the menopause. And it's generally perceived to begin normally after the 35th year. Most women experience it around the 50th year, but there's a wide range for that. So with aging, the body cools in varying degrees in the individual organs and the organ systems. What about warmth? Warmth now. Warmth is the body that houses and keeps alive the ego organization. And the ego organization in turn creates the warmth. This is the inner warmth. The ego organization lives in the warmth. It must have the warmth. And if it does not have the warmth, which varies from organ to organ, it will diminish its incarnation and its investment in that part of the body. This is something that the anthroposophic physician is always looking at. What is cooling off here? What is heating up too much? What is inflammation? Why is there inflammation somewhere? Why is it that inflammation accompanies some forms of arthritis? It accompanies some forms of sepsis, the heated argument, etc. Why is the warmth organism suddenly so enhanced? But then why would the warmth organism cool off? Why are the feet and hands typically very, very cold in many people, whereas the core remains somewhat warm? These are questions that have to do with the ego organization and the diagnoser. But generally speaking, over time, the body cools. There is no such thing as 98.6. That is, I don't know when the hell that happened, but no one, you have 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, you have a fever. It's a very interesting phenomenon to find someone who's naturally at 98.6. So cooling is in the continent of sclerosis. So there is the cooling, the hardening, the petrifying in the natural world, the crystallizing, the deposits that we've already talked about, the general rigidity. All of these are elements of a general cooling down. It can happen quickly, it can happen to a great extent, and it can happen hardly at all until a very late age. And like I said, the warmth is driven by the action of the ego organization and vice versa. So I hope this makes some sense here. Okay, let's move on. Moving on. All right, now we've come to the real monarch of the forest, not the lion. We've come to the red wood ant. Now, I don't know, has anyone ever been to the Schwarzwald, the Black Forest in Germany? In the Black Forest are ants that you don't want to run into. They are the most aggressive. They're really shocking. Anthills in the Black Forest are huge. The life of the ant there is really, it is fascinating, it's intimidating, and you're getting out of there. However, let's take a look at the ant, and we will come to some understanding of why I segued here. So the action of the redwood ant actually maintains the health of the forest. The tiny ant is the key to the health of the forest. Anthroposophic medicine makes use of patterns, and I'll explain what I mean by pattern, such as this. Something we observe in the natural world has meaning for the human being. We find a pattern in the activity, in the life, in the natural world, and through a deep imagination and a picture forming. But it's all based on very clear observation and ultimately based on Goethe's gift to science. We are able to borrow processes for human health. And we have borrowed this process, thanks to Rudolf Steiner, what the ant does and makes for human health. You got that? There are many, many, many patterns out there. There is the pattern of the dandelion, the pattern of copper, the pattern of the bitter plants and digestion. Why is there something similar here? And it is this kind of imaginative science that is at the very heart of healing in anthroposophy. Okay, next. Okay, the wood ant. This is a quote from the man himself. Oh, hold on, I have to drag myself somewhere here. Okay. A forest in which no ants are carrying on their work causes great harm to the earth through the roots that are falling into decay. Further on, the wood is falling into dust. Oh, you can't see me. That's okay. Oh, geez. Laura.
We can see you just fine.
Okay. Well,
Yep.
I got to get back to the slide.
Okay. Do you want me to read the rest of it?
Yeah.
Okay. But when the ants are doing their work, formic acid in an extremely high potency is always present in the soil and in the air within the area of the forest. Can you see it yet?
Yeah, I can see it up
Okay, great. Go
there,
ahead.
but I'd like it to be bigger.
Okay.
Okay. The formic acid permeates what is falling into dust, safeguards the development of the earth. The dust is not just scattered away in the universe, but can provide material for the earth's further evolution. Now, formic acid is produced in high quantity by these ants. As a matter of fact, you can smell formic acid, you can smell the ant life if you are around them. If they are killed, if they're somehow burned, something, then this very powerful odor is the odor of formic acid. Next slide. Okay, so from nature, we have an imagination, we have a living concept here of formica the maintenance of that which is falling out of nature, that which is cooling off, that which is falling out of life, of the forest, and formica for the human being and the health of the living body. We give formica, sorry, I misspelled that. We give formica as a therapeutic agent. We know that formica is actually made in the body, but we give it in a highly potentized version, not actual formica, although one can take a bath in diluted formica, yuck, and we give that in order to enhance digestion, because digestion is so much larger than just what we take in as food. Digestion is now the handling of that which is fallen out of nature. And this is what happens in aging. As we gradually lose our incarnation into the body, we then can seek ways in which to find a new balance. It may be not quite as vital as when we were 21, but we will seek a new balance now. And one of the ways to do that would be through the use of formica. Formica is used in many preparations anthroposophically. Okay, next. So sclerosis. Sclerosis is the gradual weakening of the ego forces. And when they weaken, proper catabolism cannot occur. Now, hopefully you understand this from what we've developed here. When proper catabolism cannot happen, the soul body is impelled, like Cinderella, to scrub more steps. Soul body. The soul being all about healing. It is all about the, let's go back.
Hey, I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you. And can you repeat that part again? I'm not sure if I can get the slide to go back. So I'm going to try my best, but I'm having all kinds of, I can't see my cursor moving. So sorry about that. So can you say that again?
Yeah, right. So
about the soul.
we've moved on to a new idea, that is sclerosis. The polarity here is inflammation and sclerosis, but we're going to focus a little bit on sclerosis. There is a very famous case of sclerosis in a book by Rudolf Steiner and Ita Wegman, the first anthroposophic doctor, called Foundations of Therapy, Fundamentals of Therapy. It is a small book. I don't know if you can see this. That's the paperback. It is something that the anthroposophic therapist, the doctor, consults all through life. There is a case in there about sclerosis. And when one first reads it, you wonder, well, where's the sclerosis here, really? It's about a woman, a 61-year-old woman who had the flu, never quite got so well from it, and then began to have a series of events, psychological events and metabolic events, palpitations. She became constipated. She felt generally unwell. She felt agitated. That's the case of sclerosis. Now, why is this sclerosis? This needs to be fleshed out here. And this, of course, is what all doctors do who study this book. The key is in the remedy, is in the very famous remedy provided by Rudolf Steiner, called by Walida scleron. It is a fusion of lead in a high potency so that it's not poisonous, sugar, and honey. Now, why this preparation as a remedy? It is because when the ego organization begins to weaken and the soul body steps up his or her work, catabolism is not really carried out, but other things happen. The soul body causes problems. It causes worries and agitation and these phantom experiences like excessive palpitation and loss of breath and agitation. But catabolism has weakened. Now, the remedy does a few things. It addresses the weakening of the ego organization, and it does that through sugar, regular sugar, and through the lead. It also addresses the enhanced activity of the soul body, which must do what it does, with honey. Honey is an animal product. The soul body is the animal in us, shared by the animals. And it kind of mollifies the soul, and it allows the soul body to be less invested in this sclerosing activity. It also addresses the weakening of thinking, the hardening of thinking, the loss of memory that comes with sclerosis. So it is one of the most important remedies in all of anthroposophy. So I'm just about finished here. It's, what have we got, 5:20. I want to go back to the balance point. The balance point is always in equilibrium somehow. The idea would be to find a balance point appropriate for you. And that is the work of maturing. A balance point is not really so healthy if by the age of 50, one has increased a kind of a seductive behavior and bothering everybody, or dressing like you were 21. And I'm not saying that this is bad at all. I probably dress like an 11-year-old, but when the balance is lost, it should be regained. And it can be regained through biography work, through an intense honesty, an honesty that you may want to find with the therapist, with the biographer, with the psychologist. It can be found and maintained through eurythmy. Eurythmy, the most powerful therapeutic idea in a world that itself is losing incarnation. So as we lose substance as an earth, we have this new art that has therapeutic applications in eurythmy and therapeutic eurythmy. And the last two things, if you can begin to engage in a meditation technique, they are there in Anthroposophy if you wish to engage them. They're called the 6 subsidiary exercises. They are alluded to in one of Rudolf Steiner's earliest collection of essays called Knowledge of the Higher World and Its Attainment. They are also standalone ideas, which you can find. But the very last thing I'd like to suggest has to do with curiosity. And curiosity is an attribute that is found most beautifully in Buddhism and in the Eightfold Path that Anthroposophy has taken and taken into its own heart, has added another spiritual dimension to, but at the heart of the balance point is an interest and a curiosity in life. And this must be sought all the time. It is too easy to become disengaged, to become apathetic, to lose interest. Find the interest in a community, in an anthroposophic community, in the world. These are all easier said than done. Sorry, I don't have time to elaborate, but that brings us to the end of this contribution. Thanks.
Oh my goodness, you've given us so much here. I'm going to try to stop sharing the slides so that we can, let's see if I can go down. Okay, I think I stopped sharing, but I still can't get to what I need to get to. Let's see here.
Can you all see me? I mean, not that that's so great. Oh, okay.
Oh, now what just happened?
Oh, no more slides. It's you and me.
Okay, great. Beautiful. Now I'll be able to help people if they have questions. Thank you so much. That was just incredible. I mean, there's so much in here, and I hope that we'll have a chance to go further with this sometime. And I know we have the next 2 webinars coming up. So I think we should open it up to questions. So, okay.
Contributions.
I do, yeah, questions and contributions. Okay, so we only have 4 minutes. If it's okay with everybody, we'll go a couple extra minutes over that. And I do have one question from John and Heidi right away. Can you please, okay. Okay, so this is interesting. He's asking if you could briefly elaborate on the 9th year and maybe how it connects with, you know, aging too. If you could, if there's some sort of parallel that happens when you're 9 and then when you're older. I know that happens in the biography cycles a lot. So, and if not, whatever, that's fine.
No, the 9th year is a great mystery in that it is profound and a kind of new idea in the ideas about human growth and development. So between the 8th and the 9th year, the ego organization itself, the I, begins to, it is always descending from the head organism, going through the larynx, going out of its brain, head-centered organism, going to the heart, and then going deeper, descending deeper. And it descends into the metabolism roughly at the age of 9. And it's accompanied by certain very subtle psychological changes that you'd have to be tuned in to pick up on, because the child is not going to tell you, oh, you know what, Dad, I think my ego organization has just dropped into my metabolism. You know, that is, nor should it be discussed. However, there is a certain alienation, a certain tenderness, a certain neediness that happens because the ego organization has left the area that it was living in. And there is a slight abandonment sensation. The idea here is to bring to the child that understanding, number one, to see that there is a new neediness here, a need for comfort and support, but also to support this whole activity. Waldorf has just brilliant ideas here. Where do the Norse myths fit in? What does iron have to do with this? What does Thor's hammer have to do with any of this stuff? But if this is not achieved well, then the possibility for illness is there. All kinds of gastrointestinal weaknesses, all kinds of weaknesses of resolve, a certain kind of fearfulness just pervades the whole life from then on. Of course, there's a million ways to become afraid. But that's a sort of a little, and when the child comes through this, there is something new. Mm-hmm. And this is, for me, the real expulsion from the kingdom of childhood. It's profound, it's sad, It's very moving. And I think many of us remember very dramatic events. For me, it was utterly dramatic. I was an inside child. This is what I called myself, an inside David. And 3 weeks later, I was an outside David. I knew that something had shifted in me. My consciousness had shifted. It had developed a little bit.
Thank you so much. Great question and beautiful answer. Okay, so I am going to take one more because you talked about scleron. Yes, and someone's asking if you would recommend that as a daily remedy. And it's such a specific question, but I thought I'd bring it, if you can just for 1 minute talk about this remedy one more time, because I did lose that slide because of the tech issues.
I would recommend it, but I would recommend really going through an anthroposophic therapist, someone who knows, someone who's studied this stuff. But I would recommend it as a daily remedy. It has to be taken very judiciously. You take it for a while, then you stop. You take a break, and then you start up again. It can be used as a kind of a preventative of the sclerosing tendency, and can be used later for sclerosis. Obviously, with this 61-year-old woman, we didn't cover that case in entirety, by the way, the role of the flu here. But yeah, I would, but the Uriel has another name for it, the Uriel pharmacy. They called it plumbemeltum. The potency is a 12x. But I don't know if I would just order it here. I would go over this.
Okay, that's great. So I think that everyone's going to have a million more questions. And I think that maybe we should consider another way for people to keep getting this information. So I'm glad for everyone being on tonight and everyone's questions tonight. And I'm looking forward to our next webinar.
Questions if they come to me
through email. So you can email me if you have questions and we can pass those along. And maybe, I think we do have some resources for people trying to access anthroposophical medicine. That would be really great. Thank you so much. Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody, for being on the call. And we'll be sending out the recording tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.